right. Let's see. Chris, are we live now?
On my end, it says starting soon for the live gameplay. There it is.
We're good to go. All right. Let's see. All right. Good afternoon. Welcome. We are here for another live stream, live gameplay with Backdoors and Breaches. My name is Sean Goodwin. I'm with Wolf and Company. I head up the cybersecurity group here, and lucky enough to be joined by a few other folks today. I'm going to have them introduce themselves in just a second. But what we're planning to do is play a game here, just about 60 minutes. We are planning to definitely end by 3 o'clock Eastern. If for whatever reason the dice are not cooperating, we'll go ahead and just stop the game a little early so we can make sure we can go through the full scenario and close things out. But before we get into the game, give you guys a quick second to meet who is acting as defenders today. We have both Jan and Mike. Jan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jan Brochinek. I'm one of the security service operations managers at Integris. We're a national MSP with offices in 10 states. And we do pretty much everything. So if you need help, give us a call.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. So I'm Mike Kirkerito. I'm a senior IT consultant for Wolf and Company. Been with Wolf for about 6 years now. Mostly help with financial institutions in healthcare and IT advisory and assurance practices. So from there, for incident response, happy to join and kind of get into it with Jan today.
All right, excellent. So, Backdoors and Breaches, I'm guessing most folks are probably familiar with this here, but this is a tabletop game created by the great folks over at Black Hills Information Security. You can get the physical cards at that link here on their Spearfish General Store. You can also play online, which is what we'll be doing today at play.backdoorsandbreaches.com. We were lucky enough to work with them and create an expansion deck a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago now at this point. And what we like to do is play some of these games every once in a while just to help folks experience, what it's like to play the game, how you can set these up, and hopefully give some ideas around scenarios you can run back at your organization. At a high level, somewhat simplifying the game here, we have an incident captain. That's myself. We've designed a scenario that Jan and Mike are going to be working through trying to solve. To do that, they're going to have 10 turns to reveal the 4 different attack cards. And just like in the real world, sometimes things don't go to plan. So in addition to having to rely on their defensive procedures, they're also going to have to roll that D20. If they roll a 1 through a 10, that's going to be considered a failed roll. Now, I will give some sort of explanation, hopefully plausibly, around why that control may have failed. And if they get an 11 through a 20, that's going to be considered a success. What that means is if they successfully roll on a turn where they've also selected a procedure that would tie to one of these attacker cards, we'll reveal that and flip that over. Ideally, within their 10 turns, they're going to solve all 4 pieces. 2 last housekeeping items. If they roll a 1, a 20, or they have 3 failures in a row, that's going to lead to an inject. Could be good, could be bad. Right? To be honest, probably 95% of them are negative injects, but there are some positives in there. There are going to be a few of the procedures that are going to be shown as their established procedures. And the way we like to look at that through the gameplay is, you can have certain controls in place. Hey, we've got a great EDR, we've got a SIM in place, maybe we've got these really great controls. Okay, the technology can be good. Do you also have that tuned to your environment? Do you have those procedures well documented? Do you have employees cross-trained, right? Those tend to be that really strong control. So for those 4 procedures, they're going to get an extra 3 points on every roll, right? So a 10 that would be failing becomes a 13 and becomes a successful roll. So that's great. Last piece is once you guys call a procedure card, hey, we're going to look at our SIM. regardless of pass or fail on that roll, you're not going to be allowed to use that again for 3 turns. And Chris will be using a little marker, certainly help keep both he and I honest. He should be moving that, but that'll give you a little countdown for when you can call that again. All right, so with that, we can go ahead and get started with our game here. Chris, if you can pull up the game.
Oh, please.
And while that's coming up here, Jan and Mike, welcome. Unfortunately, you have been called here because there is an urgent incident you need to respond to. You've got this great client that is a major cryptocurrency exchange, timing unrelated. And unfortunately, they've suffered what seems to be a catastrophic breach. They're suspecting a little over 400,000 Ether has been transferred out. And current prices, it's worth about 1.5 billion, has been suspected as stolen.
Sounds familiar.
So with that, internally, folks are pointing a lot of fingers, and they're really not sure who's to blame, what's going on. Regulators are starting to ask questions, media is asking questions, and they're turning to you to figure out what actually happened from a technological perspective. With that, you're dropped into this environment, and let's see if you can solve what's going on.
All right.
Yay.
Yeah. Jan, take it away.
Well, I would suggest the first thing that we would probably want to look at here, since we know nothing, is look at our sim.
Yeah, I would agree. So taking a look at the network, seeing what's kind of coming in and out for different logs and everything.
Yeah, at this point, it's just something happened. We don't know. We don't have anything pointing to where.
Yeah, the only one I would say also, well, I guess the seam will then go further in to like looking at the endpoints as well. If we did an endpoint analysis, as someone thinks that it's coming from an internal source and everyone's pointing fingers, but I think it's probably the smart choice to start with the seam.
Yeah, Chris, can you pull that up just for folks while we're talking through? All right, great. We'll see if we have the right information being fed in, but ideally, right, a lot of information being fed in here. We'll see if you get some hits on activity logs. So if we close this out, that is an established procedure, so you're going to get the extra 3 points on a roll here. Of course, if we can go ahead and do that roll +3, that is a success.
Woo-hoo!
Excellent.
There we go.
All right, so with that, hey, the sim is up and running. Really looks to be great. Unfortunately, the department here handling the finance, for whatever reason, logs are not being fed in to the sim from these suspected systems as the primary point of contention. Unfortunately, at this point, not looking great as far as a useful tool for you. You'll see that 3 there. We could potentially revisit that again if you want, but not helping out right now.
Alrighty. Any thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, so I guess if they don't have this seam, if that's not configured, is the endpoint, is there anything on the endpoints that are configured?
1 second, sorry. Hold on, I did lie to you initially. Sorry, looking at my wrong screen of notes. The sim does actually help you. And what I'm going to give you here, and for folks that are looking to set up a game themselves, procedure cards can map to multiple attack cards. What I'm going to do here is looking at which one, this potentially covers multiple cards. We are going to reveal the pivot and escalate card for you. All right, so at this point, and reason being, this is something ideally your sim would pick up on, if not the attack specifically. And Chris, if we can bring that up. What the attackers did here, known as a golden ticket attack, right? Abusing the Kerberos environment, impersonating someone else. At this point, for this to become a factor for you, the attackers are inside the environment. They have access to the domain controller, and they're abusing that KRB TGT service account credential to impersonate other people. So at this point, they are able to impersonate any user in your environment through this attack path. So regardless of how they were initially in, they got to that point, and they can now present as any other valid user in your environment.
Okay.
How big
So
is our environment?
That's a good question. We're going to consider, based on the size here, you've got several thousand active users in the environment.
Okay. And then I guess, is
The
it
reason
kind of
that,
targeted to a domain group or anything?
the
Well,
reason I asked on the size, Michael, was, isolation would be my go-to here, but if we're isolating thousands of people, we might be creating more chaos than what's currently existing.
Right.
yeah, so, for the sake of the gameplay here, we're going to say it's a single domain, right? So this attack does cover the entire domain. Large organization, you could have multiple, and then we can get into, what the trust situations look like. But in this case, a single domain, and unfortunately, the nature of the golden ticket attack does allow the user to impersonate any other user in the domain. All right, so with that, Chris, if we can close out the golden ticket here, they do have one of 4 attack cards solved. Where do you guys want to go from here?
We need to, how are they getting in is the question here. Where is the initial compromise and the persistence so that we can stop them and then deal with resetting everything?
Right. Was it something that could have been a phishing attack, or is it a vulnerability from a system that's unpatched, or where would we like to kind of look?
I think endpoint analysis, since we've got a pretty good, we got a +3 modifier on that. If we can find what endpoint was, Sean said there's several endpoints looking strange, so we would look at those endpoints to see what they tell us, and they might tell us where this particular thing started.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good.
Real quick, before we go to roll there, Chris, can you pull up the endpoint analysis just so folks don't know what's going on here? This is, think of it like a mini forensic analysis of the endpoint. So in this case, we're primarily looking at the users that have the ability to sign off on transactions, especially of this size, and going to look locally at the machine. Is there anything we can recover to figure out, maybe how the attackers got in, maybe how they moved throughout the environment, etc. Cool. And this is a +3 modifier, so you will get that those additional points on your roll.
Nice.
And another success for you.
Yay.
Excellent. All right. So endpoint analysis, unfortunately for you, now I have a valid unfortunate comment for you. The people in kind of the panic before you were brought in here, turned off their computers. They were called in for kind of all hands on deck in the office. They closed their laptops, took off, went inside to the office, and unfortunately, nothing useful for you in the local memory.
Okay. Well, we know the AD has been compromised, so server analysis may be a place to go.
Yep. Looking at the traffic there to see
what logs may exist on it. Could go at firewall. That may identify anomalous traffic.
And then if we're just looking at something as well, would it be kind of beneficial to look at maybe threat hunting or network threat hunting modeling, anything there that would say, okay, who are threats, where would they kind of target, where they're coming in and trying to poke holes there.
Pull up the network threat hunting card.
Yeah, so here specifically looking at Zeek, Rita, Security Onion, etc., right? Looking for some of that anomalous traffic. Can we see real clear indicators of likely C2 traffic? Can we see something like an excessively long connection out to a web server or a session that's using an excessively large amount of traffic?
Yeah. So I think all three of those are good options here. Where do we go?
I think maybe going with this card just to see, investigating a little deeper into where they kind of pivoted and escalated, see if it brings up anything for their initial compromise or where they were able to be persistent or anything there.
Yeah, let's see if it finds anything, and if not, then maybe we hit that server analysis.
Okay, so we'll go with network threat hunting here.
Sure.
All right, so this is not an established procedure, right? So the idea and the gameplay being maybe you have some technology available, but don't have that real fine-grained tuning, cross-training, et cetera. Chris, if we can close this out and go with a regular roll, they don't get the +3 modifier here.
Oof.
And all right, so remember, the 3 fails in a row does result in an inject. So you see your strike count moved to 1 there. And like I said, unfortunately, with it not being an established procedure, you went to boot the machine that you were relying on here, and it is so far out of date that just supporting updates for that virtual machine are going to take several hours here. So not something immediately usable for you. Perhaps you'll be able to revisit that.
Thanks, Microsoft.
And Chris, if we can also move the trackers around so we don't lose track of when we can recall some of these cards, that'd be great.
All right.
Right, where do you guys want to go now?
Shall we go to server?
Yep. Yeah.
Another natural roll.
Yep, so natural roll here, no modifier, very similar to that endpoint analysis, but this time we're looking at a server, maybe something like, we know the golden ticket.
Take a look at the card.
Yeah, we can bring that up. This is going to be, hey, maybe we're looking at that domain controller that appears to be compromised as well. Two strikes.
Wow.
All right. All right. So, yeah, unfortunately, you guys went over to, the data center here, went to look for do that analysis on the domain controller. And maybe as part of this, the attackers are onto you and they're locking out some of your admin accounts, forcing some rotations. You're having trouble getting into the box itself to look at some of this. Chris, if you can also just move, yep, thank you. So the 2 would be on threat hunting, and we'll drop the 3 down onto server analysis now. So again, another one, maybe you've got another team member working on regaining control of credentials. You may be able to look at that box in the future, but not going to help right now. As a quick reminder, that is 2 strikes in a row. 1 more failed roll will result in an inject. Maybe a good one. Probably not.
So we checked the endpoints, checked the server. Would we kind of revisit isolation for those accounts that we found that were compromised in the golden ticket attack, or anything there? Or what does the isolation, how would that kind of help us there?
So we can bring up the isolation card and look at it. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is the nature of the golden ticket attack is
network
so
isolation.
pervasive that it allows the attackers to impersonate every single user in that domain. Okay. So you can play whack-a-mole with individual machines.
Network isolation is the ban hammer that says just isolate the entire network so that the threat actors can't communicate in or out, which, depending on how badly it's compromised, that is someplace you need to go at times when dealing with an incident. But it is incredibly disruptive to the victim. Now we're talking about 1.5 billion, so maybe this is warranted.
Right.
Yep.
You do have some more flexibility in end user disruption, maybe outside of a customer support facing role. Certainly worth keeping that in mind. I'm sure that call center is being flooded.
Um, One of the things I don't think we did was firewall log review, did we?
Nope.
So that can
Yeah, let's pull that card up. Take a look here.
hopefully let us see where things are moving.
Yeah, take a look. Is there any sort of traffic maybe that we can see that would be worth
Internal
taking a look
IPs, external IPs, lots of traffic, that type of stuff.
at? Yeah, certainly. All right, and this is a +3 modifier, so hopefully this will get you out of the danger zone with your 2 strikes. We'll go ahead and get a +3 roll on the books here, and a
Yay.
success. Almost more importantly, getting you out of the world of injects than it is revealing anything else. Looking at the scenario here, you went to take a look at the firewall. Hey, can we see any sort of clearly malicious traffic? Organization of this size, it's probably there. We're looking for a needle in the haystack. Nothing is jumping out on your first pass review as, hey, this is definitely bad, right? You've got the appropriate maybe ban list, employees reputation list. Nothing's hitting there. You are able to bring one of your team members over to start going through that with a fine-tooth comb. But at this point, this isn't the smoking gun you might have been looking for.
Okay.
Where to now? For what it's worth, you can revisit Sim, right? That's fallen off and is available. Again, some of the other procedures you haven't got to. If you want to see any of them in more detail, we can certainly bring those up and give you guys some ideas here. I will remind you, 1.5 billion. So people are starting to breathe down your necks a little bit with, okay, great, they were able to pull off a golden ticket attack, but why don't we know more yet? Where did the money go? Who did this? How did they do this?
So then would we kind of look at the end users and their behavior? So if we're looking at kind of the UEBA,
Yeah.
there's any users that have any abnormal activities or anything there.
I like Yuba, and we could be dealing with an insider threat.
Right.
That may reveal that as well.
It's like logging, but it actually works. So this is an interesting one to certainly look at, right? Both from an insider or detecting some of that anomalous activity from someone that maybe has been compromised and doesn't know that. I'm not going to sway you guys one way or the other. We can do that. I'm not sure if there's other cards you wanted to look at before deciding.
I guess if we're looking at the end user itself, looking at a permissions audit, maybe there was someone that had elevated privileges that is an internal actor and acting maliciously. But other than that, I don't know.
The problem there, though, is we tried server analysis and it looks like there were no logs. So
Right.
a permission audit based on that would fail.
Okay.
The server analysis was a failed roll, was it not?
Yes.
Right. So that was, I'm trying to keep my scenario straight here. That was more due to being unable to access that machine,
Okay.
right? You've had the attacker was kind of messing with some of your admin credentials. You've got someone working to recover access, so you could do that analysis.
What does the permission audit card tell us?
Yeah, that's really while this comes up, right? Doing a kind of a traditional who's got access to where, is that appropriate? Right here, definitely looking, the tools linked to the card are heavily on cloud permissions. All right, but who in the environment is granted what access? Are we actually following any sort of roles-based access control, or is everyone given the keys and said, go off and have some fun?
With the amount of people that we're dealing with, I'm not sure if this is going to point to a smoking gun.
One thing that's interesting you guys haven't called yet, just my thinking, is looking at any sort of EDR solution, right? You tried to take a look at the endpoints themselves from a forensic perspective, but
That's true. Where's the
you,
EDR card?
you looked at some logs. So the EDR card, endpoint security protection analysis, is the name.
There it is.
Tends to be a powerful card, kind of hidden down there.
Well, it's like that big on my screen, so yeah, that one's worth doing. Because oftentimes the EDR is screaming and nobody's paying attention.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely take a look at this or either the Yuba, whatever.
One of the two. I think before Yuba, EDR might make sense because now we're looking across the endpoints themselves.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good.
Let's hit EDR.
All right, we'll hit EDR. That is a natural roll, no +3 modifier for you here. Man,
I haven't gotten one of those yet.
That's man, you guys have some weighted dies, I think. So you went to look at your EDR platform, and wouldn't you know, those license renewal reminders you've been getting for the last couple of months should not have been ignored. And unfortunately, you don't have access to the full portal to look at the logs. At this point, you have quickly asked accounting to go off and pay that invoice immediately to see if we can get any sort of insight. But again, another one of these tools that you're going to have to try and revisit later.
Okay.
Yuba?
Yeah, either the Yuba or maybe even revisit the sim if we're thinking that will have anything else that would be able to give us any leads or direction. But yeah, if you think Yuba, I think
it's worth trying.
Yeah.
We know they're impersonating users.
Yep.
All right, so we'll go for you, but here another natural roll. We'll see. And not only is it a failed roll, so what I'm going to give before we pull up the inject here is, because of the golden ticket attack, generating so much activity through your Yuba solution by virtually every user being impersonated. The attackers here really just sprayed and prayed with that ticket. There's so much information coming out of that it is seemingly unusable for you. And we'll go ahead and pull up an inject here for you. Like I said, most of these are bad. Some of them are good. Maybe you'll get one of the rare positives that's going to give you a few more turns, because we do have 3 left, so you're going to need to bat 1,000 here to close out the incident. But go ahead. We'll see what we have here, if we can bring that up.
Let's rock.
That is unfortunate. One of you, I'm not sure who wants to quit here, but unfortunately, one of your lead responders has decided to...
You're going to have to rock the air guitar.
pursue maybe a less stressful career path here. So for the remainder of these, what we will do is just use the natural roll. I'm sorry, we'll still use the same rolls, but we will ourselves have to take off 1 point for any of those rolls.
Okay.
All right, so with this, just a reminder of where we're at in the game. You do have 3 attack cards left to reveal. You have 3 turns left at this point. All of your established procedures are back on the table, which is the positive for you. I know the D20 was not friendly to you with many of these, but if you did want to revisit any of them, that is possible.
So $1.5 billion walked out the door. We're still bleeding. We're not getting any closer to solving this. God knows what the threat actors are doing. I say we isolate.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that, or isolate it all.
And from a scenario perspective, right, and we're talking about this from an incident response perspective. At this point, are you considering isolating the actual environment, right? Because from a device perspective, I don't know, and maybe you're thinking of a different angle here, but at this point, you just, hey, let's take the company offline, disconnect our network from the internet, and try and see if we can stop the bleeding that way.
That's where I would go right now.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We can go ahead and try that. That is a +3 modifier for you. Before we take
+2.
away +2, right?
Yeah. And then we fail again. Okay.
Right. So a failure here, coming in with a 2. So unfortunately, you cut off that main network connection. Unfortunately, the money is gone. So that's not helping you better understand where the attackers were coming from, how they maintained their persistence, or any of that. So at this point, you are now getting some significant pressure from the executive saying, not only are you making it harder for us to handle this PR situation we're going through by cutting off the internet, we are no closer to figuring out what happened.
All right. So I think we'd have to then look at crisis management, as we've lost 1.5 billion. We've cut our network and are still haven't figured out anything to get us closer to where it was initially compromised, as well as where it was exfiltrated.
And this one is always an interesting point in the game. I think it's worth talking about, and from an overall tabletop perspective can be useful, but you guys have been having some tough rolls, so I'm going to give you a strong suggestion not to call this as one of your final 2 cards.
I would agree.
Reason being, this is a really important aspect of incident response, understanding what this actually looks like. If we're going through the scenario in the real world, you probably call this much earlier than we are at this point. But from a gameplay perspective, this really serves as a good talking point for the teams, especially if you're playing maybe with people that are less technical, to understand how it fits in.
Though.
But it does not reveal a single attacker card.
Right. I would think maybe go back to Sim. We've at least got a +2 modifier on that one.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we can go ahead and roll a +3 here for the Sim. All right. So the good news is
it's a 19.
Unfortunately, no, that is a 20 plus the 3. Right. So we're going to get an inject. What I am going to do, though, is first reveal one of the attack cards, because it does match up for you. And what we're going to do is flip over the C2 and exfil card for you, because this is an interesting one for folks to think about. If we can bring that up, is hosted note taking as C2. So this was a pretty cool tool, primarily offensive Notion. Was kind of the inspiration here, but several others that rely on this concept of leveraging that developer API in Notion to be able to function as a command and control infrastructure, do some post-exploitation activity, and a really cool tool to take a look at. But conceptually, looking at some of these third-party solutions that you have that may have some of these APIs built in, do you understand what that is actually doing and looking like in your environment? Do you understand what sort of access those tools may have for your end users? And then, more importantly, something like this, do you have the ability to detect if that's being abused?
Right. And as we're looking at the detection part, it looks like it has endpoint security protection and network
all the things we tried.
We tried it and they all failed to where.
Yeah. Hey, that brings back the importance of not just buying the tools, but making sure, right, you've got those procedures written, you've got your employees trained, uh,
Yep.
and it's fully
And
deployed.
cross-trained. The guy who knows
Correct.
how to read the logs is on vacation in China.
Right. Awesome. So we can go ahead and close this. You guys do have an inject coming your way. So I don't want to forget that.
It's going to
Get
give
that
us
in.
extra rolls.
It
Yes.
could. There are some that do that. I'll go ahead and draw an inject and see if you get lucky here.
Uh-oh, that doesn't look good.
No.
Oh, okay. So I think we're going to go ahead and say that team member you had that was off working on the side trying to recover access to that domain controller you're hoping to inspect has accidentally corrupted that virtual machine for you,
That
and
never
likely
happened.
not going to be available to you on this last turn. All right. So we have one turn left here.
So
Where do you guys want to go?
Okay.
So we know we have C2 internally going out. We know we've got a golden ticket attack.
And it was from a note-taking application. So
How
was
are they
that
staying in? So the note-taking application implied that they're on a workstation somewhere, at least one.
Yep.
One of the other unfortunate roles that you had was on your EDR.
Yeah.
That is back in play at this point. So hopefully that renewal invoice has been paid. Maybe worth taking a look at. I'm trying to think some of the other failures you guys had. Unfortunately, a lot of them.
Yeah, we've been rolling great. What is endpoint security protection analysis? Is that the EDR?
That
Yep.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So would we go back to the EDR, see if we finally put it back in place, or see if the guy came back from vacation to?
Yeah.
One final Hail
See if the
Mary.
machine finally booted up after Microsoft's update.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, we can go ahead. We can pull that. It's going to be a natural roll for you. And let's see. Unfortunately, not. In that poor accounting person's flustered state, they were pursuing the wrong invoice for you. So your EDR in this case is still not available. That is the end of the 10 turns. So what we can do is first flip over the initial compromise card to be able to kind of talk through the scenario for folks here. The first one, not at all surprising, probably, being a phishing email
All
here.
the things we
right?
tried.
Yeah, the SIM, the server analysis, and the EDR all would have been helpful for you if only they were set up properly. Right. So, unfortunately, hey, initially the attackers got in through some form of phishing email. In this case, for the story we had built here, it was one of your IT folks. And not only did they fall for the fish and share some credentials, but they had just one standard admin account that they were also using for their day-to-day activities like web browsing and checking email.
Ouch.
So when that account was compromised, that led the attackers to being able to leverage that golden ticket attack. We can close this out, Chris, and we saw they were then able to use that hosted note-taking application as their command and control. But to actually establish persistence, we can go ahead and pull that up. And good old fashioned living off the land with some of your, valid remote
Screen
monitoring
Connect,
management
Terra.
systems. Exactly. So since it was a compromised IT user with privileged access, they also had access to some of these other tools, which made it much easier for them to maintain access until they were able to get to the point where they were ready to pull off their big heist. It's a good reminder with incident response that a lot of these things don't always go to plan. Looking at the 4 attack cards you guys had, it really was you were calling a lot of the right procedures, and for one reason or another, they weren't matching up. Appreciate you guys being here playing. Appreciate the folks following along with us. Any closing thoughts you guys want to highlight before we take off?
The 1.5 billion scenario that you just sort of alluded to, did you see how that one got there?
The
A third-party developer machine injected code. That third-party stuff getting into your network, yeah, that's the scary one.
Right.
It's so difficult to vet those downline suppliers and connections.
Yeah, that's tried to pull a little bit of a shock and awe for the basis of the scenario here, coming off of those headlines. But yeah, that's a good point. Jan, Mike, appreciate both of you guys being here. Folks watching along, appreciate that. If anyone has a scenario that they want to run or want to act as a defender, please feel free to reach out. We like doing these. It's pretty casual setup. Just looking to help people understand how to use the game and talk through some of these technologies.
Let me make a point about the game itself. We've used this internally with our incident response team just as a casual game to play to bring up our skills as to what are the various things to be looking at. So by building the scenarios, you kind of put yourself in the mind of the attacker, but by playing it, you start to learn what are the tools that we should have in place and what are those procedures that we may not have buttoned up properly.
Yeah, that's well said, Jan.
Cool. Well, appreciate the time this afternoon, guys. Good catching up. Good
Thank you,
conversation
Sean.
with you. Appreciate, and look forward to another one of these in a couple months. Thanks, guys.
Bye.